Hi, welcome back to Reflections in Real Talk. I'm your host, Judy. Today, I wanted to share a little personal story about why I wanted to start this YouTube channel. I feel as though I've woken up from a deep sleep, a deep financial sleep. I find myself around the corner from retirement, having worked over 40 years, but not being fully prepared to consider all the financial aspects of managing money in retirement. And most of my friends are expressing the same sentiment. I started going into this rabbit hole of investigation, looking at information from Warren Buffett, Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, and then I found some newly minted YouTube content creators like Rob Berger, who I think is just so informative and such a voice of reason. And I've learned so much about the difference between index funds versus individual stocks, IRAs, tips, bonds, etc., and how to search for and evaluate a financial advisor, which is so important. I wanted to share this information with all my friends and viewers and start motivating everyone to take charge of your financial life today. I also watched a documentary I'd like to share. I'll put it in the chat below. It's called The Retirement Gamble. It was produced back in 2013 by Frontline, but it's still very relevant today. They talked about the retirement crisis we find ourselves in today and how and when the 401k started back in the late 70s and early 80s and how Americans are in trouble. Why? It was about how we transitioned from a society that had primarily relied on the company managed pension funds to the 401k and IRA that workers are expected to manage on their own. I remember back in my grandparents' day, maybe you do, people would work for the same company for 30 years and then they would get the gold watch. And the retirement meant the golden years. They would sail off into the sunset without a care in the world. At least that's the illusion we believed in, but that probably wasn't even true. Unfortunately, pension funds weren't always invested wisely, and companies wanted to turn the responsibility over to the worker, and they did. So now, in addition to worrying about raising kids, managing a household, taking care of ourselves, our families, your family's health, working full time, now we're expected to be financial wizards, knowledgeable about every aspect of finances. It's complicated. Most people have not been provided with adequate information or ongoing education or at least enough to fully understand and manage your own accounts like 401ks, 403bs, this whole alphabet soup of various investment vehicles that we're supposed to be educated on. There are far too many choices and not enough time to become an expert. I remember being in my 20s at my first corporate job. They set me up with an appointment for a financial advisor that was provided by the corporation. They sat in the lobby. They set up 15-minute appointments for everybody that was newly onboarded to the company at the time. They provided a list of maybe 30, 40 different funds that were available within the portfolio. They asked me to pick some and pick a percentage that I could set aside comfortably from my paycheck, and I did. And then I drifted off into my financial slumber, set it and forget it. However, I really didn't understand what I was doing. What was I investing in? What the expense ratios were? What was an expense ratio? What would be the right asset mix for me? What was my risk tolerance based on my age? None of that. And nobody took the time to explain it to me. Or if they did, they shrouded it in mystery and jargon. I really didn't fully understand it. And now I look back and I think, wow, what a disservice that was. And I think I was also intimidated. I don't know if that was intentional, but looking back, I think it was. I do think that some of these financial advisors wanted to intimidate us and surround the whole financial industry with mystique and make it so complex that we couldn't understand it. Many are fiduciaries, which means they are legally bound to act in the customer's best interest. But at the same time, they are employees of the investment firm and want to make money for the firm and themselves, of course. But even as an investor, you could earn a good return. It wasn't always clear what the advisors were earning at our expense. And what about the statements? I certainly feel that many of the statements that I received in the mail were unreadable and unintelligible for most people. They were layered with rows and rows of numbers. You see lots of listings, transactions, buy, sell, trade. What does that mean? What's the bottom line? What did I start with? What did I end with? And what percentage did I earn for my investments over a certain period of time? It's buried in so many different ways, as is the expense ratio. What are they actually charging us to manage our money? And if it's only 1%, that doesn't sound bad, right? That's minuscule. but it's actually quite misleading. A 1% management fee for managed funds can add up over the lifetime of investing based on compounding interest. And it's the only industry where the customer is taking 100% of the risk and the advisor benefits with zero risk. Plus, many of the money managers recommend funds that can also charge another 2 to 5% for their fees. Using compound interest for a fund earning a gross annual return of 7% with a 2% annual fee or net of 5% to us, these fees can cost an individual investor over 50 years as much as 63% of what you would have had. So I had to ask myself, is this something that we can do ourselves? How can we minimize these fees? I want to explain this to my friends and my viewers and break it down in easy to understand ways so that you can start taking charge of your financial future. And the time to start is in your 20s when you have your first job. Even if you're working at a minimum wage job, put aside a small amount of money and start learning to understand investing. And for anyone that says, I can't afford it, I dare you to ask yourself if you can forgo a movie ticket, a cup of coffee, a large soda, and a pack of chips, or a dinner at a fast food restaurant once a week or even once a month. Just get started. I'm not a financial advisor. I have no special certifications, and I'm not offering advice as a financial advisor. I want to motivate everyone to start learning about investing because, after all, isn't that the ultimate reward for our work? Of course, we want to have meaning and contribute and have a purpose in our life and our work and intellectual stimulation and socialization. But if we are going to work 40 plus years, don't we want to maximize the fruits of our labor and earn a fully funded retirement? I mean, really, it's criminal that this is not taught in an easy to understand way in our high schools, in our colleges. Despite the fact that this information is readily available to us today, most people tell me it's too confusing, it's boring, I let my husband manage it. I have a financial advisor that tells me what to do. We meet once a year. Relinquishing this total control to someone else completely is a recipe for disaster. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't seek guidance, but understand what they are saying. And if you don't understand, feel empowered to ask questions until you do. Advocate for yourself. I was reflecting, why is it so much easier to gain that knowledge today? And I think a lot of those tools that the financial investors use, like the wizard behind the curtain when they did our one on one sessions, using tools like the Monte Carlo simulation, which plays out different scenarios, hundreds of different scenarios using an algorithm to project out over 30 years, good markets, bad markets, and so forth, and the likelihood of succeeding with various investment scenarios. And I'll get into that a little bit more in detail with another video. But those kinds of tools, those financial calculators are all available on websites today. Whether you invest with Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, or one of the other sites like Betterment or New Retirement. And I think it just takes a little bit of work. And isn't it worth it? I mean, what are we working for if we don't know where our money is going? And I also think for years I suffered from the illusion that a financial manager would help offset some of the risk for me, and that's what I was paying for. That is absolutely not what they do. In fact, I think their primary role, besides walking you through what your risk tolerance is and setting up a portfolio accordingly, is to keep you from freaking out. Because the worst thing that you can do when the stocks go down is to sell. But they can't time the market. They can't say stocks are low, buy today. And I think for years, I did believe that they had that ability because, after all, they're studying the market every single day. It's their profession. I always believe since this was their full time job and they kept their ear to the financial ground, when they have more inside information that would help guide me and minimize my risks, shouldn't they be able to help offset any loss? Wasn't that what I was paying them for? But even as a fiduciary, even as a professional that is legally bound to put your best interests at heart, they don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does. And nobody can tell you what the market is going to do today, tomorrow, next week, next year, 5 years from now. Anyway, that's really the backstory of why I wanted to start this channel, and I hope you'll find it informative as time goes on. I'm going to delve into every topic I can think of and review the suggestions my audience puts in the comments. I'll be happy to do the research for you and even do online demos. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this informative. This has been Reflections and Real Talk, and don't forget to like and subscribe. and keep learning more about retirement planning, tips, and financial insights.